Okay, back with 50 vlogs and 50 days, 50 articles as well. And thanks to Genetics, Progene and Renko for helping me put this together. And today I'm going to talk about sheep, roundworms and resistance. Big issue for flocks. This is a very busy whiteboard today. And you know, unfortunately worms can seem quite simple, but they can be quite complicated. And I'm going to try in the article below as well, step out what maybe farmers can do in controlling resistance, because it's a big issue for flocks. So when I talk about roundworms in sheep, we're all aware of nematodirus at the moment in lambs. That's a challenge. And last week I read about a study that was done in the UK looking at resistance being found in nematodirus, something we wouldn't have thought of before with white drenches, and I'm not surprised. As season progresses for ewes and lambs, particularly lambs, it's our roundworms like Telodarsasia, Trichostrongylus. And these worms can cause symptoms from scour, browny, watery, dirty tails, and lack of thrive. Just so lambs can be showing lack of thrive. So worms can be an issue. And then if you throw in the fact that some of the products we use to treat them are not ineffective through the development of resistance, this creates a real challenge in grazing systems. If you have a mild winter and a long grazing season, good early turnout, this can be a big challenge. So how can we control worms in our flocks? What are the challenges? So if you look at it, I think we've talked about the worms, the products. So in the early 60s, I think the white drenches, the benzodiazepines were discovered, transformational. Then you developed the resistance in them. The yellow levamisols came along, and shortly after them, the clear macrocyclolactones, the ivermectins. But I suppose sheep farmers now are aware that they have a new drench called the orange drench, malipantal, and there's a new double combination of deroquantol and ivermectin. These purple drenches, not available in Ireland at the moment, will be probably in the future, is available in the UK. So we have an extra 2 levels of anthelmintic wormers, and you think flocks are okay. But also on the back end with flocks at the moment, we have resistance to all 3 of these, and some flocks we've development of resistance to orange drenches. We don't have any new products coming. Probably regulations are going to tighten up on these prescription medicines. So traditionally, parasite control was we have parasites, we dose, we get the result. And I think that worked really well. And I was talking about this 20 years ago, we'd be talking about mixing dosing, turning dose, rotating dosing. But if we have resistance in our flocks, we've really just got to put a little bit more effort into the control of worms during the grazing season. So when I talk about resistance, I suppose we need to remember that every parasite is a life cycle. The adults inside in the gut produce eggs, they're released, they hatch out to larvae, they develop, and they are infective to a stage they're infective, and they're ingested, and then those adults grow to adults again. The adults are the multiplier here, and this is why we see the rise. This is the season here from one lambing to the next. It's very busy. That's why we see the rise in egg counts, because the life cycle and these adults producing more eggs, you get the rise up as grazing goes on. Nematodirus is slightly different. They produce an egg, and the larvae develop in the egg, and what you could get is a mass hatching, and that's why that's a challenge at the moment. And now we've resistance to it, our reported resistance, we need to be very, very careful. So okay, that's the life cycle. So traditionally we controlled worms. There's 2 ways of looking at worms: inside the sheep and out in the pasture. But we traditionally controlled it by dosing these worms, killing them, these susceptible roundworms. What happens over time is the worms are smart, they're built to survive. If we continue to use the same product, these worms will develop resistance. So we'll have the same species of worm, but they'll now be resistant. They'll have developed through various techniques and changing their DNA to develop resistant worms. So what happens is we get the development of resistant worms in our population because of the overuse. And we must remember, if we're dosing now these animals with resistant worms, we're knocking out the susceptible worms, and now we're getting the development of just resistant worms in sheep. So we're killing the susceptibles, and when we look at dosing and moving these to new pastures, when they go to new pastures, dose and move, all they're producing on the pasture is resistant worms. So that's how resistance develops. It's probably, if you look in our flocks, a lot of white, a lot of yellow, less clear, but it's there. And now this new orange drench has reported resistance. So how would I know if I have resistance in my flock? There's a drench test, a fecal egg count reduction test. So basically, if I'm going worming my ewes or lambs, I'm going to take some dung samples off a group of lambs. I'll mark them, and then I'll dose, and then I'll look at repeating that fecal egg test a certain period of time after the dose. It depends on the dose. 7 days for yellows, 10 to 14 for white, and 14 to 16 days later for clear drenches. And what I'm looking for there is I'm looking to see a 95% or more reduction in the number of eggs per gram in the fecal egg counts to suggest that yes, that dose is working. Now if I'm not seeing that, I have to measure how much resistance I have, and now I know that I have resistance to a certain product in my farm. When's the last time I used a yellow? When's the last time I used a clear? How can I start rotating products? What does my worming strategy, we still need wormers, we just need to think about what wormers am I using when. Now some farms with resistance to all three are starting to bring in these doses, the orange and the purples, and again it's only if we start using these as routine treatments. They're very expensive, they're prescription medicines, it's not something we can do, so we need to look at when is our peak level, how am I going to have the most effect with an orange drench. So in lambs, you know, a peak risk period as a clean out drench. We still need to use existing wormers, we need to know where we've resistance, and we need to make a plan, and that is my key message, that I don't have the answer for sheep farmers for resistance. I need to know that you have it, diagnose it, then look at the plan of grazing, and we need to have instead of just using dosing, we need to combine dosing with the idea that there's a stage outside the lamb that we need to think about, and that comes down to grazing management. What pastures are we turning lambs out in each year? One of the things I'm excited about, and people might have heard me talk about it before, is research in UCD and elsewhere on mixed species swards. And what the studies are looking like that we're seeing a reduction in worm issues where mixed species swards are being grown. Now they create their own challenge around management and a bit more difficult, but I think that's exciting. Again, from the physical activity of the worm trying to get up, the perennial ryegrass versus some of these mixed species like chicory is more difficult, and they contain tannins which might have antiparasitic effects. So there is stuff happening, not just with the dosing around grazing strategies, that we can do in our flocks to slow down worm issues and slow down the development of resistance. We need to be measuring, and I mentioned them here in resistance tests, fecal egg counts. So these are just dung samples and looking at the number of eggs per gram, and this will give us an indication of when levels are rising up. And you know, a lot of farms now with multi-resistance are doing this on a weekly to fortnightly basis. And that's how intense it has to be to kind of monitor, okay, fecal egg counts are rising, we need to go in with a dose. But they're also doing a very good job on looking at clinical signs, looking at weights. Fecal egg counts become less reliable as the season progresses in lambs and older animals, but really reliable for the first couple of months as part of a program. So fecal egg counts, we need to start utilising them, because what you'll find is, and I found this in flocks, is you can push out your first dose and we're using less dosing, and then we can push out our second dose, and we're also having development of that immunity to these roundworms. So we're not aiming to dose yos at all in our flocks if we can at all. Yeah, minimising our dosing and lambing, and that's where I'd like to be. One challenge with yos is, yes, as they come up to lambing time, they have a periparturial dip, or their immune system dips down, and they're more inclined to be spreading and shedding more fecal eggs, more issues pre-lambing, which does cause a challenge. What I would say there in the flocks we've done plans for is we've actually been very selective about only dosing yos that have carrying triplets or 10 or under condition yos, and that's why all of this ties together with regular body condition scoring and a good flock health plan. But so that's the season. They're key things. So when we're looking at worms, we need to look at fecal egg counts, clinical signs, and weights. Weights are very, very important. Look at our grazing strategies. Because roundworms are an issue. And the other thing is, if you don't have this issue on farm, if you don't have worm resistance, the only way you can get it into your farm is buying it in, and that's why quarantine dosing for all flocks is important. You want to keep a closed herd, but people will be buying in a ram. Sometimes the silent, you know, the rams can carry diseases and we don't know about them into our flocks, and we might say, oh, we're a closed flock. Well, you buy in rams. Well, oh yeah, but it's just rams. But I suppose quarantine dosing is important to think about. So quarantine dosing, where we've applied it, is looking at combining maybe an orange or a clear drench together, so we're maximising efficacy on that particular dose for anything coming in, that they get a quarantine dose and they do not go back out to pasture or don't go join the flock for at least 48 hours. They stay on concrete for 48 hours, stay indoors, to allow them to shed out any worms that are inside in their guts. And that will slow down the introduction of resistance. So to me, these drenches here need to be spared for absolutely for quarantine dosing, which is minimal amount, should be a minimal amount to a lot of flocks. And then in flocks with resistance, looking at what doses are effective, use them at peak risk time, and that requires a bit of planning. Okay, I've covered a lot of information. I'll try to tie it together again in the blog as well. So my thought for today, I do a thought for today every day, and this one came into my head this morning. I don't know why. It was something that was said to me many years ago by somebody when I was on the wrong track, not a very wrong track, but on the wrong track professionally, and I was wrong. And the person turned to me, and I remember them saying to me, "Be better, not bitter." And I think it was very good advice, and I chose to be better, by the way. So that's my thought for today. Better, not bitter, when it comes to being challenged on something we might be doing, or just in general. It's good to be better, not bitter. Happy safe farming.